Hi, my name is Katie, and I am the creator of Katie's Florida Vegetable Garden and WildCanningChronicles.com. Over the next few days, I want to show you guys how you can render down your own beef broth at home and pressure can it. So to start, let's go over the ingredients. So the most important ingredient is going to be your beef bones. So these, you can get beef bones at your local butcher. These I got from Florida Fresh Meat Company, which is a meat company out of Central Florida, and they actually have all local meats that are grass-fed, no hormones and no antibiotics. I have come to absolutely love their meats. You can purchase these online. If you do live local to where I am, you can also find pickup locations where you can order it online and pick it up, and I will drop the link down below, so hopefully you guys will check them out. So here I have 2 bags because I'm going to do 2 batches, and each bag is anywhere from 3 to 4 pounds, which is exactly what we need. Next, for your bone broth, you're going to need 2 stalks of celery. So I'm going to cut this up and put it in both. You're going to need 1 large carrot, a white onion, garlic cloves, fresh oregano, fresh thyme, and fresh rosemary. The last ingredients that you are going to need, aside from water of course, is going to be apple cider vinegar. And since I'm going to be pressure canning this, I'm choosing to use canning salt. And the reason why you want to use apple cider vinegar and canning salt is the science behind bone broth. So you have bone broth with these really tight wound up protein strands in them. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to add the salt to the water, and the salt is going to start the osmosis process. So it's going to start pulling all of the nutrients and the moisture out of the bones and out of the marrow that's in the bones and on the meat. And then the vinegar is acid. So ideally what it's going to do is it's going to start to unravel those really tight protein strands, so that when you use it for cooking or you use your broth to drink, it's going to be more readily available for you to digest those nutrients. So if you don't know, I teach locally at the Little Rock Cannery, and I teach food preservation and gardening there. They have a vegetable stand out front called the Veggie Guys, and that is where I picked up our produce for this. So the vegetables are also local, and the herbs came from my garden. So the first step in the process is I've put all my bones on a cookie sheet, and I've set my oven at 350 degrees. I'm going to roast these bones in the oven, turning them a couple times for about an hour until they're browned. And that roasting process is what's going to give my what's going to give my broth a really dark color. So on the stove, I have 2 large pots. I am going to be rendering down 2 batches of beef bone broth. And for canning purposes, I found that 2 batches work better for me because in one weekend, I can process a case of pints and a case of quarts. So the time it takes to render down, it makes it more worth it for canning purposes to do too. However, the recipe that I have posted is for 1 batch. And what I'm going to show you now is how you're going to put together 1 batch and start it. So while those bones are in the oven roasting, what I'm going to actually do is put all of our vegetables, salt, vinegar, and water into the pot, and I'm going to start to heat it up. If you've ever worked with meat products before, between hot and cold, you know that you can't put cold meat on a hot surface or the proteins shrink. They shrivel up and your meat will shrink. And if you put hot bones in cold water, it will reverse the cooking process and it may mess up your broth and how things gelatinize. So my goal in this broth is that I want to get a really fatty, rich, gelatinous broth, which is why we're going to render it down for 24 hours. So I've rough cut our vegetables. So I have peeled and halved the onions. I have peeled and roughly chopped the carrots, and I have cleaned and roughly sliced the celery. Now, I am going to be straining this through cheesecloth. So some people like to make a little bag for their herbs, but since I'll be straining it through cheesecloth, I just kind of throw them in there, and that's just kind of how I choose to do it. I also have 3/4 cup of apple cider vinegar, and I'm going to add in 2 tablespoons of canning salt. Now the recipe that I use calls for 10 quarts of water. So if you've ever used mason jars before, you're interested in canning, you have the big thick ring around the jar. If you fill it to there, that is your quart line for your water measurement on your jar. So I'm just going to take 2 jars and I'm just going to fill them up with warm water until I have 10 quarts. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the lids on these, and I'm just going to heat them up until they're on a medium-high heat. So guys, these bones are roasted. So we are gonna start dropping them into the water slowly, because water's hot, bones are hot, and I don't wanna burn myself. I'm gonna put half and half. Whoops, don't do that. A little sticky. Now I'm gonna take the juice that's on the tray and I'm gonna split it up between the two pots. And in order to get the brown bits off my pan, I've heated up some hot water and I am going to pour that on. And I'm going to use a spatula and scrape off all these brown bits. And I'm going to add that mixture to the pot too. So now we're going to put the lids back on. We are going to heat these up to a boil. Once they hit a boil, we are going to turn them down to the lowest simmer possible, and I am going to let them simmer for 24 hours. I think I have to go play with my dog. Hey guys, so it's Sunday morning, and I let this render down an extra 12 hours. I lost some water, which I'm not too concerned about because I'm not going after this for quantity, I'm going after this for quality. What I'm doing right now is I have a bowl and a strainer, and I'm just gonna ladle out the big chunks, and then whatever's left in the bottom, I'll run through some cheesecloth and a funnel and strain it into a glass jar. So now guys, all I'm doing is straining my broth through cheesecloth, and I am trying to get the excess herbs and meat chunks and little cartilage pieces floating around in here. And I'm just gonna strain that for my broth because you don't want to can it with all those particles in it. You don't wanna drink it or eat that later anyways, because those weren't like the good cuts of the meat, you know? Okay guys, so I have to show you this. This is the one that came out of my water bath canner, which technically is not ideal for making broth anyways. However, I don't have a ton of money to run out and just buy stock pots. I try to be thrifty, so I just use my water bath canner and then I have a small stock pot. This one came out of the water bath canner and it's cloudy. It does have a lot more fat on the top and the fat is congealed in a different way. This one went through the actual stock pot and it is much clearer of a product. There's gonna be more of like a glycerin feeling to this. I can actually feel it on my hands. My hands are very oily. And if you notice, the fat has a different consistency as well. So this, what happened here is if you have a cloudy stock, it's still good. It's still gonna taste really good and it's still gonna be really nutritious for you. The only thing is at some point in the process, the quality of this stock's color and texture changed because there was too much heat applied in the process, and that was me. And that's pretty much because water bath canners are made to boil intensely and stock is not. So I recommend using a stock pot, but if you do see this somewhere in your process, you have added too much heat and it was either too quickly or for too long. So as I mentioned, I have two different qualities of beef broth. One came out a little cloudy, which was my mistake because I accidentally overboiled my broth, and my other came out just absolutely perfect and beautiful. So these have been chilled in the refrigerator. You can see the fat content has risen to the top and it is hardened. What I'm gonna actually do is, this is your choice. I am all about good animal fats. So when I pressure can this stock, this is not gonna be for drinking or for making soups. This is gonna be used for making rice, using as cooking bases and making gravy. So the color of that broth isn't gonna affect the products that I turn them into later and how I use them. So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna scrape the fat off of the ones that have that clear color to them, and then I am gonna put the fat into these and use that when I'm cooking other things. That way, when I'm cooking things like soups, I don't have fat floating around in my soup when I go to eat it or serve it. So I have two pots on the stove, both have our broth in it, and this pot is my cloudy broth, so that's the one that I added all the fat to. That way I can keep a clear one for making soups at home. And I have these on a low heat. I am gonna heat these up just until they start to steam, because when you can, you need to have a hot jar with a hot product to go into your canner. So I have all my jars lined up ready for me to sterilize when I'm ready, and then I'm gonna have this heating up on the stove. When this is ready to go, I'll come back and I'll show you how to fill your jars. So So if you guys have never been up to the cannery, our entire canning system runs off of a steam boiler. So I'm gonna actually drop my jars into a steamer, which is gonna sanitize them. It's gonna get pretty loud in here and it's gonna start to get pretty hot in here, so I'm actually gonna put my hair. But when you're watching this process, I just want you to keep in mind that our canners are a little different than a canner that I would be using at home. Okay, it's a lot of steam. So my jars are clean and sanitized, so I'm gonna come over and I am gonna actually start filling them with broth. Okay guys, next part is totally up to you. I'm not afraid of salt. I know salt means flavor, and I can salt this before I put this in the canner and it will change the flavor of it. However, if I try to salt this after it comes out of the canner, it's not gonna enhance the flavor in the same way. And that goes for all of your canning that you do in general. Anything that you want to salt beforehand, the salt is going to enhance things as you cook it in the pressure canner. If you don't want to add salt, we already added salt to the recipe, so you're fine. It's completely your option. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to add my stock into my jars, and I'm going to fill it to the 1 inch mark for my 1 inch headspace. So here's a tip. Before you apply your lid and your ring, you want to make sure that you wipe the rims down with vinegar, because the broth is really fatty, and any of that fat residue that's left behind on the rim of your jar can actually deter your jar lid from sealing. So now I'm just going to apply my lids and my bands until they're fingertip tight. Put them on the rack and start loading them into the canner. I'm going to then sanitize more jars until my clean broth is done, and I'll show you how we seal the canners and how long we process everything for. Okay guys, so my jars are in the canner. So now here comes my Rosie the Riveter moment. I am going to put the lid on the canner. I'm going to bring everything up to pressure. Once I get it up to pressure, I'm going to process my pints at 20 minutes. I'm going to process my quarts at 25 minutes. Let the pressure canner come down from pressure once my time is done, and then I will remove the lid, let the jars cool for a little while, and then let them cool for 24 hours before I remove the rings, check the seal, and wipe them down with vinegar, and then put them up for storage. They're talking so much in there. You guys done? Oh, they're not. So if you guys like this video, there's more information on wildcanningchronicles.com. Also, if you're interested in growing your own food and preserving your own food, I also host Katie's FloridaVegetableGarden.com. If you want to check out the Little Rock Cannery, you're interested in more than just bone broth, I will post the link below and you can take a look at our schedule. Also in November, if you are interested in bone broth, I will be hosting a class on chicken and beef bone broth. We will also be talking not only about the process of making bone broth and how to pressure can your bone broth, we will also be talking about how to use your broth in cooking at home. So thank you guys, and I hope that you have a great week. And remember, good food comes from your own hands.